Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Okay, so Polemarchus and Socrates, they're having this discussion back and forth. Polemarchus expresses a particular conception of justice, of right and wrong. When we talk about justice, that's not a term that you and I use an awful lot. We're more likely to speak about somebody being right or wrong, and not just right or wrong like in one thing, but in their character, who they are. So an unjust person is somebody who typically does things that are wrong, right? Unfair. They transgress the rights of others. A just person is somebody who generally respects the rights of others, does the right thing. They're really just if they do the right thing without having to be asked or watched or told what it is. So Polemarchus says justice is doing two things. What are they? It has to do with friends and enemies. So, yeah.
So like help your friends and people harm to your enemy?
Yeah. So, if we want to, we could say help, or we could say, we'll just put good, all right? And do bad things to your enemies. So, people who are on your good side, be good to them. That means you're a good person. And part of being a good person for this sort of traditional conception, and I don't actually have a name for this. If you have a name that you can come up with, that's kind of catchy. I would love to have a name on this theory. Bless you. If somebody's your enemy, then you should be bad to them. That's what it means to be an enemy, right? They already want to do bad things to you. So it's not just perfectly okay. It's actually a good thing for you to do bad things to them. I think a lot of people in our society, a lot of people in every society have had this point of view. Doesn't necessarily mean that you go out and you hunt your enemy down and kill them, kill their family, torture them, burn their legacy down or something like that. It just means that you have to protect yourself. Enemies, some people want to take advantage of you. Some people see things very different from you and are willing to denigrate you or cut you out of opportunities. So think about how this might work out in a corporate workplace setting. Obviously, unless you're this guy in American Psycho, you're not going to actually find your competitors and kill them and hide the body. But what would you do in a workplace to an enemy? Cut them out of a deal? What else? Yeah.
Like just scheme them in a way?
Scheme them.
Yeah.
That's kind of a nice word, scheme. What would you do? What would that be like?
Try and screw them over in some way.
Okay, like you set them up so that they're going to make a presentation and then nothing works in their presentation, or their facts are wrong and they look like a fool in front of the boss. Okay, that would be doing harm to your enemy. What's that?
What? So put drugs in their desk?
Put drugs in their desk. Yeah, okay. Frame them for something. That would certainly be doing harm to them. And why would you do that to them? Because you can presume that they're going to do the same thing to you if they can. So this represents a world in which everybody's divided up basically into friends and enemies. Friends, you ought to be good to them. You ought to take care of them. Otherwise, you're probably going to turn them into enemies. You're probably not going to turn enemies into friends by being nice to them, so you may as well just treat them accordingly. Now, Socrates points out three problems with this point of view. And two of the problems I don't think are actually particularly good arguments. One of the problems that he points out has to do with this question of skills and knowledge and usefulness. And I'll run that down in a second. I just want to put what these different ideas are. The other one that he brings up has to do with who is actually good at this. And then the third one, the one that I think is the most interesting, is this he starts to question who actually is a friend or an enemy. So let's deal with the first two fairly quickly. Socrates makes an argument here that when you're following along, it catches Polemarchus up, and you might actually say, yeah, this makes sense. But if you look at it carefully, and Plato does want you to look at it carefully, he doesn't imagine that you're necessarily going to do that the first, second, third time around. But if you worked at it long enough, you'd say, there's something not quite right about this argument. Plato quite often will have Socrates make bad arguments that actually tear somebody else's arguments down, and that other person doesn't catch it because they're not smart enough. They don't have enough practice in thinking these things out. So Socrates, starts out by saying, things along these lines. If there we go. What is it that you're actually doing when you're being just? So you're helping your friends, you're hurting your enemies. How are you going to do that? So let's take the business example for a case. Is it enough to have this disposition to be just in the sense of having the intention of hurting your enemies to actually hurt them? Or do you need to actually know something else? Who best in a business setting can hurt their enemies? Or who best can help their friends? Socrates uses other examples like medicine and agriculture and things like that. But who best in a business setting? Yeah.
Whoever the boss is.
Yeah, it could have to do with authority. But let's say you're in the middle position, right?
And whoever's the best at the job, probably.
Very good. Whoever actually knows that particular field. In medicine, if you wanted to help your friends and hurt your enemies, who would you go to? Just me? I mean, I could give you some ibuprofen and say, here, this is good for curing a headache. What were you going to say?
That's the Robitussin.
Robitussin, yeah. Robitussin will cure anything, right? When I was teaching in the prison, those guys had very limited access to medication, and so they would buy Sudafed and take it for everything, And of course, it doesn't work for everything, right? Who would you want to go to? Who would be the person who could most benefit their friends and harm their enemies? Doctor, right? Somebody who actually has some medical knowledge. And in that case, it's not the disposition of justice itself. It's the skill that's helping them do that. Now, what is this skill of justice actually good for? Here he gets Polemarchus to make a bunch of sort of boneheaded moves. He says, when is justice actually useful? So it's not useful for medicine or things like that. When is it actually useful? And he says, is it going to be when you're at war? No, because at war it's strategy or things like that are particularly useful. And he says, is it useful in peace? Yeah, maybe in peace. So is agriculture, though, isn't it? And that's useful for getting a harvest. Cobbler's already useful for shoes. So he says, tell me, what would you say that justice is useful in the time of peace, when you're not actually at war with somebody? And so Polemarchus says, in associations, when you're dealing with other people. He says, by dealings, you mean associations, partnerships, or something else. Associations. And then he goes through this list again. Well, if it's this kind of an association, wouldn't it be this kind of person who'd be helpful? If it's this kind of association, wouldn't it be this kind of person? And so finally, he gets Polemarchus to say, well, it has to do with money. Okay, so now we are onto something, right? Maybe justice has to do with being good to your friends with money and being bad to your enemies with money. So he says, well, when is this actually going to be an issue? Well, when money is to be deposited and kept safe. So when is justice useful? When you're not doing anything with the things that it has to do with. So Polemarchus is like, yeah, okay, this isn't really making that much sense. Now that's not a particularly good argument, but it trips Polemarchus up. Leads us right into the next one. Who is the person who actually, let's say that justice really is about, guarding things, I give you some money, I say, hold on to this for me, and I'm your friend. If you're my friend, you'll actually hold on to it for me and you'll give it back to me when I need it. Who's the best person at guarding things? He asks. Well, let's think about this. This still holds today. If you had a security system and you wanted to figure out how to get around that security system, who would you want to bring in? Yeah.
A criminal?
Yeah, why? Why would you want to bring in a criminal?
Just a professional breaker.
Exactly. They actually have knowledge. And if they're a successful criminal, they've actually got some on-the-job experience, right? They actually are the best person at doing that. And Socrates brings this up with other skills. The doctor is also the best person for poisoning people, if you wanted to do that. So ironically, the just person would be the one who could be the most unjust, and who probably actually has been the most unjust. If you want to keep things safe, put them in the hands of somebody who actually knows how to keep them out of other people's hands, because he's actually broken in and taken them himself. That seems like a paradox too. Then it sounds like, well, we have no idea what justice is. These are kind of, tricky arguments. They're not that particularly good. The argument that really has the most weight is this question that comes up for anybody who has this point of view. Who actually is your friend? Who actually is your enemy? And this is where things get a bit more murky. So before we actually look at what Socrates says, let's think about whether we, in our time, ever look at things that way. Are there areas where we do in fact say, we have friends, we have enemies, we should benefit our friends, we should try to hurt our enemies as much as possible? I see you nodding. What do you think would be an area?
You could hurt our enemies if possible. I don't know if that was possible. I mean, you could even here at school. Like, who's really your friend, who's really not your friend, who's your enemy?
You're getting to actually the stuff I was going to, so that's good.
Yeah.
Does it take time sometimes to figure out who actually are your friend? Who's actually your
Definitely, yeah.
Why?
We got to figure out who you can trust. You come to school, you don't know anyone.
Yeah, that's a big one. Or you could come to school and have some people from your high school,
Well, yeah,
but that still is the same problem, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have more acquaintances than actual friends. Because a friend is someone you trust, you really know them. Acquaintance is someone you see, you say hi, maybe hang out with them. Not as close.
Yeah, it's interesting. This view sort of divides the whole world up into friends and enemies very quickly, doesn't it?
Just two?
Well, two categories. I mean, you could have multiple enemies. What were you going to say?
No, because even if you come with people from your high school, people change depending on the setting or the people.
Yes. And they may change for the better, or they may change for the worse, right? And you may find out things about them that you didn't realize in high school, too. So Socrates brings up this problem. Can we be mixed up about who our friends and our enemies actually are? This would, be the sort of thing you're talking about. It takes time to get to figure out whether somebody, some people we think are enemies, and it turns out actually no, they were just having a bad day. They don't really hate us. They don't actually have any ill will towards us. They come back the next week and apologize, and we're like, oh, okay, maybe this person's actually friendly towards me. They took the time to apologize. Other people, you guys have all heard the term frenemy. What's the frenemy? That's a nice phrase that we use these days, yeah.
Pretend to be a friend, you're going to like it.
Yeah, they're really out to get you, and they're friends with you so that they can get close to you, so that they can cut you down behind your back, or like what you guys were talking about in the workplace, so they can screw you over in some way. There's a lot of that going on. Somebody else had their hand up. So there's this problem of perception. There's the apparent friend and the real friend. There's the apparent enemy and the real enemy. And if you're following this sort of theory of justice, and you go with the appearances, you'll actually be doing the wrong thing, because you should be benefiting your friends. But if the person that you think is your friend is actually an enemy, then what you really should be doing is harming them. So you're doing the wrong thing by benefiting the person who you're mistaken about. Likewise, if somebody really, somebody is really a friend, friendly towards you, but you think that they're an enemy, and you harm them, or you attempt to harm them, you'd be committing injustice against them. You'd be doing the wrong thing. Now, how can we tell the difference between apparent and real friends and enemies? What is it that actually makes a person a friend in your book? If you had to divide the world up into friends and enemies, I understand, there should be a lot of people in between, right? Let's say that I forced you to decide. How would you decide? Yeah.
Someone who takes the time to communicate with you one-on-one.
Okay, communicate with you one-on-one so they care about who you are, yeah.
Loyalty.
Loyalty, that's a good trait.
So don't go out of their way to do something for me, to do it without being asked.
Yeah, they show goodwill towards you. When we get to Aristotle on friendship later in the semester, that's going to be a really important part of his definition. The friend is somebody who does good, or at least intends to do good to you. The enemy is somebody who does harm, or at least intends to do harm to you. But could there be people who are like potential friends or potential enemies? Why is it that the friend does good to you? Is it just because you happen to be friends with them? Socrates goes a little bit further. He gets Polemarchus to go a bit further. Were you gonna say
I was
something?
just gonna say that your friends depend on like what you get out of them and what they get out of you. So it's like if you guys get something out of each other, you guys tend to be good friends.
Yeah. Although, like we're going to see with Aristotle, it really depends on what you're actually getting out of the person. The lower it is in the scale of value, if it's just usefulness, those sort of friendships don't last very long, and people get angry with each other and become enemies pretty quick. One of the things that Socrates is steering him towards is that the genuine friend is somebody who seems and actually is good. You want to be friends with people who are actually good, who treat people, like you said, loyally, who intend good things for them, who actually care about you as an individual, who you actually benefit and who are going to benefit from you, some sort of relationship with them. There are some people that you look at and you'd be like, yeah, I like that person. I don't even know them, but I think I'd like to get to know them, because you're recognizing goodness in them. The potential enemy is somebody who's actually bad. Now, there's problems with this, right? Again, some people seem good, but it's only an appearance, and you get close to them and you find out actually they're bad. They really ought to belong in the class of enemies. Other people seem like they're bad, but it turns out you get close to them, they're actually quite good. You may have this experience with, family members who you defend against other people, and you're like, yeah, if you just got to know him, you'd realize that he's not a bad guy, or, bad woman or something like that. Now, how do you actually sort of negotiate with this kind of thing? You're supposed to be doing good to the friend, right? So you're supposed to be doing good to good people, and you're supposed to be doing bad to bad people. There's this fundamental problem of figuring out who these are. Are we often mixed up about this sort of thing? Is that actually part of the process of growth as a person, you think? The example of coming to Marist is pretty apt. How many of you have been screwed over by trusting the wrong person? Only half the class? How many have been screwed over in your lifetime, not necessarily here at Marist, by trusting the wrong person? Who you thought was a friend turned out not to be a friend. My daughter brought up something like this, she's only 10. Just the other day when we were talking about it, she said, yeah, I thought this girl was my friend, and I told her some secrets, and then she told everybody the secrets, and they made fun of me. Clearly that person was not a friend. That person was a frenemy, the apparent friend who's actually an enemy. And according to Polemarchus, my daughter now would be justified in doing anything possible to hurt that other kid, right? Do you see any problems liable to come up besides the just problem of figuring out who's who with this? Any other issues that might be a problem with this? Yeah.
People might just act a certain way because they don't feel like being looked at as the bad one. Or some people lie too.
Okay, so would they be enemies and they?
No, like, for a person, let's say just this one person just
Yeah.
wants to look like a good person in front of everybody.
Mm.
But in actuality, you're thinking all this other random stuff. But they
Yeah.
don't really act upon it.
Okay, so there could be a difference between action and intention.
Is this like an objective view on people, or are you supposed to take this as a personal view? Because I can see someone as an enemy
Yeah.
from my subjective point of view, but you can actually be a good person, but I can have like a justified reason for not liking him.
Yeah.
He could be my enemy.
Yeah, this point of view is a bit crude. It doesn't actually allow for those sorts of distinctions. In response to your question of is this sort of just supposed to be subjective or objective, I would say it's supposed to be both. And that could be one of the problems. We'll come back to you in just one second.
So it has like a polarized view, like anyone that you have in the enemy side.
Yes.
No matter how, like, they may not be a bad person,
Yeah.
you're still doing harm to them.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the person's not a terrible person, it's just you don't see him as a friend.
I think that's along the lines of what you were saying too, right? So yeah, it does polarize things. It forces people into these two camps. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, doesn't it depend then on the person himself? Because whoever's an enemy to you might be a friend to somebody else. So
Yeah,
therefore-
that's it. And we have that old saying, the enemy of my enemy is a friend, the friend of my enemy is an enemy. Not only does it polarize your own relationships, if you imagine this going through a society, if there are already rivalries, if there are legitimate reasons not to like people, it's going to turn people into enemies. It's going to eliminate the possibility of concord. These are not the things that Socrates actually brings up. Notice the problem that he brings up. He says, when you harm somebody, are you making them better or are you making them worse? You're actually making them worse. So you're making your enemy into a worse person by harming them. This theory says that that's the just thing to do, that's the right thing to do. But you're actually making that person, in a certain sense, less just, more screwed up, more angry, more whatever. So the strange thing is by doing justice, you're actually creating more injustice. And Socrates, gives you this fairly radical point of view, which says you shouldn't really harm anybody, even if they're your enemy. And that's kind of a tough position to take now, isn't it? Where else have you heard that sort of morality? Yeah.
Catholicism.
Well, and Catholicism is a particular institution within the larger religious body of Christianity. The gospel, turn the other cheek. Socrates doesn't go so far as that. He doesn't say forgive your enemies or anything like that. But it is along those kind of lines, and it's pretty paradoxical. And if you want to get to some of the toughest verses in the gospel, that forgive your enemies, pray for them, turn the other cheek, that's tough stuff to do. Because then you say to yourself, yeah, but these people want to hurt me. They actually want to do bad things to me. I'm going to be making myself vulnerable to them. So we're going to actually leave off there, just noting that analogy.